So I'm Brandon Moore. I'm here with Infoverity, an enterprise data management consultancy and systems integrator partner of Treasure Data's. I run Infoverity's MarTech and CDP practice, and I also manage the relationship between Infoverity and Treasure Data.
Hey everyone, and I'm Libby Kane, or Libby Canes, if you saw the shenanigans that happened on stage yesterday. And I'm Executive Vice President and Director of Marketing Strategy and Data Intelligence for Extraco Banks.
Unfortunately, we don't have any pictures of Louie in this presentation, but
We should.
awesome. So what we are going to talk through today, so we'll start by telling you a little bit about who Extraco Banks is, what we call the business agent, which is the agentic AI solution that we supported for Extraco. In our own words, we'll talk through a bit of the agentic AI implementation process. We'll actually show some screenshots of the solution in action, and then we'll make some tangible recommendations on how to approach your first agentic AI solution. We will be reserving some time at the end for questions as well. So.
Perfect. Well, I want to tell y'all just a little bit about Extraco Banks. So we are a $2.5 billion in asset, privately held, 123-year-old community bank located in the heart of Texas. And our primary goal is to serve our customers for generations, so both them and their family, from a business, banking, wealth management, and private banking perspective. And in order to do that, as you can see, we have to offer a vast array of products, actually quite a bit more than a traditional community bank does. So we have quite a bit of operational complexity, is what I would say. So, all right. So, beginning in 2019, Extraco decided that they wanted to move forward with using our data. We realized that we had a real asset with what we had, the type of customer data that we were collecting, and we weren't operationalizing it in any way from a customer experience perspective or from a revenue generation perspective, or even just from like expanding customer relationships. And so we started to do a lot of research and put together a 3-year implementation plan, and the CDP was the cornerstone of that project. So when we were vetting everything out, we decided that these were the business needs that we wanted to accomplish. So first and foremost, we needed to do data unification and create that into a single golden record. And then secondly, like I mentioned, we wanted to capitalize on those assets. We really wanted better customer segmentation so we could get into, true targeted one-to-one marketing. Democratizing access, we had a very antiquated kind of bottlenecked approach for how people could, people being like our line of business leaders, could access data. And so we wanted to be able to give them access in real time from an analytics and insights perspective. And then last, just future readiness. We wanted to be able to have the tech stack in place so that we could take advantage of any market opportunities as they came on deck. So the challenges for us, we have 44 disparate sources of data across 8 different lines of business. I was like, is that a lot? And someone was like, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. So just trying to figure out how to unify that data in any single way was a little bit terrifying. And then also our segmentation process was super manual. Like when marketing wanted to do customer segmentation, it was getting a spreadsheet and getting another spreadsheet from another line of business, and we're trying to cross-reference, and it was very poor, and we didn't have a lot of confidence in it. And then last, we were also using raw data, so we didn't have anything that was standardized or normalized for us, so that was a huge challenge. So the results, since we implemented the CDP, we are 52% up year over year in our conversion rates for our campaigns, which is whoop, whoop. I think that's a little amazing. We got a great team. And then also for just in 2025 through the end of Q2, we've already added $52 million in earning assets to our balance sheet. So that's pretty impressive as well. For us, we also can now regularly do marketing sprints. So we are constantly iterating and doing campaigns. A lot of times we'll run them for like 2 weeks. We'll check the conversion rate. If it's good, then we'll put the assets behind it to build out like a full campaign. And then also, this all just kind of culminated in 60,000 unified profiles. So we've got those 44 sources of data. We've actually ingested 15 today inside the CDP. All right. So, what's next? We spent all this time creating this trustworthy data set for marketing, but we really wanted to figure out a way to use that in other instances within the organization. So, one of our big use cases we talked about was data democratization. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could get our line of business leaders the ability to query in natural language our customer data anytime they had a question or they wanted to run a campaign. And we could do that without having to necessarily put them in the CDP. So when we heard about AI Foundry, we felt like this was like the perfect proof of concept for us to work on trying to do this data democratization. So thus the business agent was born.
Awesome. So you kind of described the business agent a bit already, but the goal was to, in plain language, get essentially your non-traditional marketing CX teams that would be using the CDP access to the CDP data insights. The focus for our project is really loans and transactions. There's a lot of disparate and shared value in having access to those data sets, specifically for line of business owners, banking branch managers, and we really wanted to nail a few key things, which we called our MVP requirements. One, the solution had to be quick, self-service. It had to provide validated and accurate results. Had to show an audit trail of essentially what was the process and the steps that the solution was going through in order to provide results to the end user. It had to be consistent, so regardless of who asks the question, or even if the same user asks a question today or a week from now, it follows that same process to provide meaningful and accurate results. We also wanted to make sure that the solution was flexible, so recognizing that the version 1.0 of the agent was going to be just that. With the availability of net new data sets, how can we expand upon the solution to provide more impactful responses with access to new data and also taking on new use cases that support different parts of the business. As far as nice to have requirements go, we wanted to stay focused on those critical capabilities but not lose sight of the opportunity to drive an outsized impact. And so one is how users actually access the solution itself. So in our 1.0 iteration of the business agent, it was deployed through Treasure Data's AI Agent Foundry, which requires folks to have a Treasure Data login and familiarity with the Audience Studio. So importantly, that also puts some strain on Libby and her team in managing the user access, making sure that people know how to access it. They're trained on the tool itself. All the custom agents that you might build within AI Agent Foundry can also be deployed via webhooks to other interfaces. And so in the future, we might explore deployment through Microsoft Teams and just other tools that people are maybe using in the day-to-day so that they use it more frequently and it's more intuitive. We also briefly explored syndication, so thinking about how do we save results from a single session, share those to other users. There are some cases where you'd ask a question of the agent itself and it would create some sort of visualization, but being able to export that easily, share that to other parts of the business, even create dashboards that can be used by the extended teams and revisited over time. So let's talk a little bit about the Agentic AI implementation process. There have been a lot of sessions on Agentic AI, but I don't actually feel like this was covered a whole lot. So this is a good opportunity to talk a bit more there. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but was planning to describe what is Agentic AI and just giving the state of where the industry's at, thought it made a lot of sense to do that within the lens of generative AI. So just to create that distinction, generative AI creates content, image, code, videos, audio, pictures. Agentic AI leverages generative AI to perform business tasks. It's typically a pretty narrow application, can react dynamically to their environment, make decisions with minimal involvement from a human. So as we think about the process, step one with any technology solution is really defining what you look to accomplish. For an Agentic AI solution, doing that within the lens of the data that you have available that can inform how the model responds is really important. You wouldn't want to take on something and then later in the process realize you don't actually have a trustworthy data set that is required in order to accomplish what you're looking for, and really defining the end users as well. So put yourself in a day in the life in their shoes. How can this be operationalized and put into their daily workflow? The other thing is having black and white stage gates that if we show this, this can make it into production. One of the things that we experienced working on this project was just new requirements or new feedback, the classic scope creep, and not letting perfect be the enemy of progress when taking on a solution that can actually make it into production and impact the lives of these folks day in, day out. The implementation, I'd say the key thing that took some time that's worth considering is this concept of retrieval augmented generation. So I actually didn't hear this discussed a whole lot at other sessions, during CDP World, but RAG is essentially the concept of, instead of providing generic responses, having the agent provide generic responses like a ChatGPT or a Claude would if any user in the room asked a question, training or providing access to your own enterprise information to the model itself. So a good way of describing this is, if you looked at Extraco Bank's CDP model, you've got customers, you've got accounts, you've got transactions. Well, what other businesses have customers, accounts, and transactions? You got retailers, you got grocers, you got media companies. You get the point. And so we need to be able to tell the agent itself that a transaction to Extraco means a withdrawal, a payment, a transfer, a deposit, et cetera. And then this is also a great opportunity to build a set of essentially operating instructions for the model itself. You can kind of pre-program the use cases on, here are the types of things that you respond to, here are the types of things that the solution should not respond to, and how to react to those. On the validation front, I think that talking to folks outside of technology, there's a lot of skepticism still on how can we use AI in our daily operations. And it's really important that you and your implementation team spend a lot of time making sure that the results are valid before putting them in front of the business. So this is an opportunity to have known answers of how many auto loans were generated, new auto loans in September. And you know the answer. Does the agent come up with the right response? If not, go fine tune your logic and make sure that it can get to the right response. But it's also an opportunity to stress test what did everyone do at the end of 2022 when ChatGPT became the biggest thing in the public sphere. I went on ChatGPT and I asked it everything under the sun, things that I probably should or should not have asked, and saw how it was going to respond. Your end users are going to do the exact same thing. So make sure that you understand how it's going to react in those situations ahead of time. The next piece here is on end user training. So really, this is your opportunity to start to study your end users, make sure that you understand how this is going to get put into their daily operations. There's just this concept of change management that gets discussed. It looks a little bit different for every single business, but the reality is you could build a technology solution that works, it is impactful, but if it can't be operationalized into the business, it doesn't drive value. So really understanding what that looks like for your organization up front. And I'd say these blocks of validation and end user training is where most of the time should be spent. And that is where we spent most of our time as well. The last piece here is don't lose sight of the opportunity to monitor consumption, usage, create dialogue with your end users, build a backlog, take on new use cases. So what does treasure data bring to the table? How do the pieces parts come together for this solution? So in our own words, these are what we see as the most impactful parts of the AI agent Foundry. So on the far left, you've got the user. They're asking a question to the business agent. And we talked about the business agent being able to respond to inquiries on loans and transactions. The reality is, and Kaz talked about this as well, the age of small agents. The business agent is essentially just the quarterback. So smart enough to know someone's asking about loans and route to the loans agent to get a proper response or transactions, et cetera. And underlying all of these agents, you have a mix of text instructions essentially for how the agent should work, who is Extraco Banks, and then the actual database tables that exist in the CDP as well. So those are your knowledge bases sitting underneath. And I think an important distinction as well, when we first approached AI agent build out across our entire client base, it was kind of a daunting topic. And realizing that we're actually not creating the underlying AI model, we are actually creating an AI-powered system. So treasure data provides access to Claude's or Anthropic's Claude models, so we don't have to go redesign all of those tools and how they're being leveraged. That is the brains that sits behind all of this thing that makes it a lot easier for you to actually build your own agents without having to create the underlying framework. So let's talk about the business agent in action. We did redact some of the sensitive information here, but I think some of this stuff will still be impactful for just seeing how these are configured and how they work. So the first part here is really just give the agent a name, select your model, give a temperature of basically how creative or strict you want the agent's responses to be. Then there's an opportunity to connect the agent using what are called tools to whether it's other agents or knowledge bases. This is also an opportunity to kind of put some governance into place. So if you're the transactions agent, you probably don't need access to the loans data set. That's just an opportunity to potentially provide the wrong response. And then this block is essentially our system prompts, a text-heavy opportunity to say this is how to respond to questions that look like this or that. If someone asks questions about data that you don't have available, say that essentially. And you can see kind of more of the same here with two of our sub-agents. Bear with me. Two of our sub-agents, the loans and transactions agent, they just have different sets of instructions. An example of this for the transactions agent is in our transactions table, we've got transaction type equals D. What does that actually mean? The agent would never know. We had to tell it that D was debit, AKA a withdrawal. So.
All right, great. So for some of our sample prompts, we focused on a lot of the types of query requests and data requests that we receive frequently. And so, that's part of the reason why we chose loans and transactions for our two data sets for the proof of concept. So this is an example of a very common request that we receive around withdrawals and deposits. I can't tell you how many times we've pulled this query over the years because, people forget and then they always have a new question. So, what's important about this is just that no matter what the question is asked, that the business agent is smart enough that it knows which small agent to pull the data from, like Brandon mentioned. So
you can kind of see the interaction between the user and the agent itself, and then some redacted fun information.
Yeah. All right, so for this second response, this actually came from our consumer lending team, and we wanted to put together a campaign for customers whose auto loans were coming up for payoff, but rather than waiting for the 60 months or 84 months or whenever you think a traditional loan payoff is, we knew that they were paying it off earlier and getting their loans, getting new cars earlier, and so it was super easy for us to just put that prompt in there. It went out and pulled the data from the loan agent, and we were able to execute on the campaign super quick, which was great. And we found out it was actually like 29.6 months. Little food for thought there, yeah. Who knew? We didn't, so. All right.
I went ahead to the next one.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for this, like Brandon mentioned, a big use case for us was the ability to create a visualization for any of the prompts that we were doing. And that way, so the end user would be able to socialize that within their teams or with other leaders within the organization. For this prompt, actually, we were looking at the variance of interest rates in our loan portfolio because we wanted to see if there's an opportunity for us to reprice at certain levels. And it was great to have this visualization because it was really easy to see immediately kind of where the opportunity was for that. All right, and last, these are just some additional visualizations. I know they're all blurred out, so it's kind of takes the wow out of it, but it's just great that we were able to do a visualization from almost every single prompt that we were able to put into the system. All right.
Awesome. So tangibly, what would we recommend when approaching your first agentic AI solutions and how to make sure they're successful? So I've seen multiple flavors of this type of quote over the last 18 months. This one is fairly recent. Gartner projects that by the end of 2027, 40% of all agentic AI projects are going to be canceled. So how do you make sure that you focus on the other 60% and that you're not part of that 40%? First, we'd say focus on proven use cases. The best use cases today for agentic AI are really things that are focused on automation and reduction of manual efforts. So these are typically things that are high volume, repeatable tasks that have a very narrow application. So the classic is virtual assistants, chat bots. It could be routing of IT help desk tickets. From a marketing application specifically, this is some of your segmentation efforts. It could be some more robust things that go beyond lead scoring to understand which customers should be routed to nurture campaigns versus are ready to be actioned by an account manager out of your CRM. And I'd say the other thing too is we always recommend the simplest solution for a problem. So really only exploring agentic AI if a simpler solution is not already available. Second recommendation is make sure you leverage an appropriate foundation. This is not just your data, this is also your tooling. A lot of the software in your ecosystem probably already has some agentic capabilities. Before exploring building something custom, look at what is provided out of the box. The second piece here is the adage that us in data like to share a lot, which is garbage in, garbage out. You need to make sure that you have all the underlying data in a way that's stitched together, is validated, trustworthy before starting to build insights that sit on top of that. This is also why it makes a lot of sense to use treasure data and your CDP as a backbone for any agentic AI application, especially in marketing and CX. You already have single view of customer, you've got clean data. Treasure data is providing all the tools to accelerate development of these models and deploy them in a managed, secure fashion. The last piece here is governance. I think this is table stakes for a lot of folks, making sure that you can manage, monitor, and actually get the agent deployed in a way that prevents misuse, and every action must be traceable and auditable, explainable. One thing I alluded to earlier that I think is an impactful way to actually approach this in the tool itself is only providing access to data sets that the agents need in order to do their jobs. So instead of saying, here's all the hundreds of data points and millions of records that we collect about our customers, maybe there's only 10 or 15 that really matter for the agent in order to respond in a way that's needed for the specific application.
Great, and so I would say keep it simple. You do not need to boil the ocean, especially if you're doing a proof of concept. For us, we wanted to be able to show value quickly, and you can't do that if you get too complex. And then also the agents themselves just work better when they have a lot of smaller tasks that they're working on. And then also, I would just say, you've got to quantify the opportunity. For Extraco, it was twofold. One, it was the data democratization, so it was trying to get our line of business leaders and frontline producers the ability to access real-time data so that they can make, real-time business decisions. And then also for my team in particular, it was the ability to shift some human-generated content into an AI tool so I could free up their time to do things that were more strategic. I would also say avoid the never-ending validation cycle. I mean, we are bankers. We trust but verify. When we originally socialized the agent with our potential end users, the first thing they tried to do was recreate existing reports. Killing me here. So I was like, no, this is not the goal. The goal is for you to have a real-time question or have a real-time business issue, and then you go in there and you put the prompt in and you get the quick response and you can take action off of that. So that was a great insight for us when we worked on it. And then last, I would just say, fostering organizational change. For Extraco, we have this saying that people commit to what they help create. And so I recommend getting your end user, or at least one or two potential end users, involved with the proof of concept or with the model process so that you can get their feedback and see how they're going to use it kind of in real time as you're building it. I would also think about how this will affect your processes. We didn't really think about that. Why were they trying to create a report? Because that's their existing process today. So you've got to think about how the model is going to change your team's work routines and then be willing to make changes to accommodate for that. I would also say you need to recognize the AI and data literacy of your organization. Everyone's at different levels, and so we talk a lot about that also at Extraco, that you need to kind of close that gap, and I would recommend spending time on that as you're building out the agent and bringing your users on deck. All right, well that is it. So do y'all have any questions for us? Yes.
You mentioned measurable KPIs. So what were the KPIs that you were going after? Was it reduction in time spent on certain tasks? How did you go about actually measuring that in the team?
Oh, with the team? Yeah, so it was we actually have a whole business process improvement methodology that we do. So from a time saving perspective, usually what we do is we'll very high level workflow, what the process looked like, and then how much time is spent in each step. And then we look at how much total time and then how many times we're replicating that process, say within a year's time. And then that's how we would quantify the time savings for that, at least for my team. From the data democratization aspect, we didn't really have, I have KPIs on how often I'm asked for data for my team. So, being able to offset that and looking at how many queries we're actually doing around loans and transaction data, and then being able to move that into the agent is how we'd quantify.
I'd also say that it's easy to quantify the reduction in manual effort and the operational efficiencies, but something that's harder to quantify is what are the insights that people are getting from the agent in their day-to-day, and how did that affect a future outcome, which is hard to know. But that's why it's important to have the feedback loop and regular communication with the end users, because they might have something really impactful that they wouldn't have thought through if they didn't have access to the tool.
Well, that's a good point, because for us, I mean, we very much did want to try to drive revenue with the system as well. That's the whole point of trying to get them, real-time access and not do reporting. So,
other questions?
I guess in the spirit of keeping it simple, how did you go about deciding which data sources to bring into the CDP in this first release?
You want me to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, so it was really based off of not a terribly complex data source, and then also just the frequency of the queries that we get or the requests that we receive. We felt like those would be two really good. Loans also hits like our commercial team and our consumer banking team, and then transactions is more retail oriented. So.
And we also did it within the lens of what data was already available and validated within the CDP. So what we did not do is say, hey, we think we should build an agent that can respond to loan inquiries, but we don't have any of the loan data yet. Let's go get that data and then build the agent. So a lot of the work, the foundational work, had already been completed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a spectacular session, so thank you both. One of the things that you both touched on was really about staying focused. So you talked about having a clear objective as you built, and you talked about staying focused in terms of your goals. I'm curious to hear from either of you the challenge and opportunity with that, because I'd imagine as you go through development of this, you're like, ooh, there's an idea, or there's an idea, and all of a sudden you're like, spider webbing out in a sense of like the opportunity that exists, which can also be a challenge in terms of getting to that end result. So I'd love to hear the experience with that and any kind of challenges or opportunities you found with that.
I can take that first.
Okay.
I'd say we frequently, we take a stab at what we think the effort is going to look like, and this goes for any project that probably most folks have supported in any capacity. Say we're going to accomplish this business agent in 8 weeks, and over time we find different things that might be more meaningful through creating dialogue with the business, and we always want to be able to accommodate those, but we work with the team, so us as a partner and also our client, to really score those and kind of build a parking lot, so to speak, of this doesn't need to be part of 1.0, or like this is a huge opportunity and we should really go after this and shift gears. So I guess we typically have a feeling of where is their value and what is this solution going to look like on day one, but that evolves over the course of any project. And so just being flexible and trying to keep everyone focused on like where is the value actually, but also not continuing to kick the can and not deliver anything because we looked too broad. So staying focused on the specific application. I guess, would you want to talk about some of the reporting stuff we heard from, like recreating new reports?
Right. I would just say, as a project manager, also, just knowing what we really wanted to accomplish with the MVP. So for instance, we talked about integrating it with Teams. That's ultimately is my real goal, because I don't want to have to train a bunch of people in the CDP. I also don't want to have to manage from a compliance perspective, adding and removing users and the policies and permissions that they have. That's a real drag, if I'm being honest. And so I was like, if I can just get them in Teams, they're already in Teams all day, every day, and it feels natural to them, right? But knowing that wasn't something that we needed to focus on, when we built out, the initial concept. So maybe just trying to kind of self-edit myself. But I would also just say, whenever I work with any of my vendor partners, when we have an idea or if we have an additional ask, I just try to be very honest, like, is this scope creep? Just tell me, like, if it is, it's cool. We can, like you said, put it in the parking lot and come back to it.
And I guess for this specifically too, we had a pretty broad end user base, and so they may not have been super close to what the initial goals were that we were trying to accomplish. So a lot of re-educating them on like, this is what we're doing now, and then certainly want to hear from them if there's other ways to make the solution more impactful.
Yeah. Great. Yes.
Go ahead.
Can we do one more? So a critical part to adoption by your end users, I think, is like them having confidence that the answers that they're going to get, from the agent are correct. I'm curious what you can share about your process for response accuracy testing. Like, what is it, like a unit test model? Curious what you can share there.
I can take that one as well. So the AI agent Foundry, any of these agents show you sequentially the steps that it is taking in order to generate a response. And a lot of those for at least this application was writing queries. And step one is making sure that the tables it's looking at and the logic is actually sound. And then step two is we need to understand what is the answer before the agent knows what the answer is. So if you say how many loans in September or whatever that example was that I used, and it says 100 loans, and I know that it's 1,000, we need to either be able to reconcile and explain that, or there's something wrong in the model. And so we gathered as many different questions, and really from Libby and her team, and also from the end users up front, on like, what types of questions do you imagine you're going to be asking of this? And we kind of programmed them in, so to speak, into the system prompts of the model itself, so it knew I need to be able to answer this question. And if things fell outside of that, that's where it was maybe a little bit more challenging to make sure that if someone asks a question of non-auto loan, they ask mortgages in September. Oh, sorry, I can't answer that question, right? It's hard to get the model to say, I don't know. But a lot of the validation starts with making sure it's looking at the right data and that you actually know what the right answer is, so you can tell if it's right or not.
And I think for us, like with the end users, that very much was a challenge, because when the very first time we got them in to the system, the very first thing they wanted to do was try to validate the data. And like I said, they were pulling up an existing report, and then they were asking prompts to try to get it to recreate this report. And so I think just from a change management perspective, as you're leading socializing the model throughout the organization, making sure that the end users understand the data has already been validated. They don't need to revalidate it for you. That is a waste of their time. So I think it just has to go into that part too.
I guess the other thing too that was a reality is people were really excited to use it. And if they told us that it needs to be able to respond to A, B, and C, when we put it back in front of them, we said, here's the tool, use it, tell us what you think. They're like, what about D, E, and F?
Right.
And it's like, well, we didn't build it for D, E, and F, right? So I guess it goes back to the never-ending validation.
Right.
Yeah, but,
Okay.
right?
Any other
Thank
questions?
you all.